Now I want to kind of shift the conversation to the technical side of things. Because
Sure.
I know you're doing a lot of cool work on Lightning addresses. I want to talk about LNURL. I want to talk about bolts and bolt 12. We can get into all of this, but maybe the first place to start off is give people an understanding of what LNURL is,
Sure.
where did it come from, and how is it being used today?
So I think it's important to highlight 2 points. I think there's been a lot of discussion of LNURL as if it's one single thing. LNURL is actually a set of standards. And you may be familiar with a few of them. You may have used them without even knowing that you were using them. So the first one that I think was pretty sizable was LNURL channel. So in the early days of Lightning, you needed to get someone else to open a channel with you, right, to you for liquidity purposes. So there was a protocol created by Anton, who's the developer of Simple Bitcoin Wallet, as well as the folks at Bitrefill with the Thor, I guess it's called Turbo channels, I guess. And they created this LNURL channel, which was basically an HTTP standard that allowed two partners to talk to each other and open a channel to each other. Basically, I'm paying you to open a channel to me. Great. This was probably the first one, if I'm not mistaken. The second one that came up was LNURL withdraw. So if you've ever scanned the QR code and received Bitcoin, right? So you scan a QR code and receive Bitcoin, that was using LNURL withdraw, right? That is not possible in Lightning right now. You can't scan a QR code and receive payments right now at the moment. That has to be LNURL withdraw. Most people don't really know because it's a QR code. It looks like every other one, and all of the wallets support it. So you point the camera to the QR code and it handles everything for you. But really what that's doing is a handshake between your wallet and the server, and then they're saying, okay, give me an invoice, and then it's being paid on the background. So that's the second one. The third one was LNURL auth for authentication, which specifically that one doesn't need to be tied to Lightning, but it was sort of built upon the LNURL scheme as well. And this is used for you to basically log into services using a public-private key pair. And in this case with Lightning, people are using their wallets public-private key pairs to log in. So you have services like LN Markets, you have services like Collider, which are allowing you to do this, log in with a public-private key pair. That is also LNURL specification. And then the most recent addition, which has already been added for a long time now, but given the recent developments of Lightning address, which builds on top of this, is the LNURL Pay. So the LNURL Pay is essentially a more robust payment QR code, and it has some certain capability. So LNURL came out of the need for better user interactions between wallet users and service providers. Okay, and a service provider in this case is a store, a website, a game, like something that has a presence online, but needs better experience. So let's go through a flow here. If as a service provider or as a game or as a company, I'm trying to pay you as a user over Lightning, the only way to do that is if you give me an invoice, right? You have to. So now the user experience right now without LNURL is, hey, Kevin, please create an invoice, but don't create just any invoice. Create an invoice for exactly 555 Satoshis. Copy that invoice, make sure it does not expire, and then send it over to me, and then we will, verify that that's the right amount, and then we're going to go ahead and pay you that. That's a horrible experience for someone that's just joining, right? Imagine that's the experience for someone earning from a game or earning from an app. So it came out of that. Really, LNURL is a Lightning Network URL specification. It bridges the orchestration of invoices from two parties on the HTTP layer. And there's a lot of controversy around using HTTP, which is interesting because the entire web uses it, right? RESTful APIs are everywhere. It's literally the most standardized standard ever, HTTP. And if we want Bitcoin to be the money of the internet, right? It's magic internet money. It needs to, in some way, shape, or form, plug into the internet. Like it has to, right? It has to be simple, easy, straightforward. If we have these two separate worlds of Bitcoin, Lightning, and then the internet, and there's no easy way to merge or pass information between them, it makes for development quite complicated, right? So what LNURL is it's simply something that has been built with multiple participants. This is not something that a single person or a single company has created. There's plenty of people in Telegram discussing this on a daily basis. And what it is, it facilitates interactions between two parties, specifically a user and a company, or a user and a website, a user and a game, a user and a service provider, right? So that's the birthplace of LNURL and why it came about. And it basically just orchestration of invoices back and forth between these two parties.
And am I right to think that this then lives off of the Lightning Network protocol, right? It's not integrated into the protocol?
Correct. Yeah, this is very much people like to say the layered approach, right? Layer 1 is Bitcoin. You have layer 2, it's Lightning. It's definitely above Lightning. It uses the Lightning invoices, right? So let me try and explain. When what LNURL is doing is it's basically saying, give me an invoice, and then passing it to the other side. The payment is still done on the Lightning side, right? The payment is done on Lightning Network. Everything is the same. It's just the orchestration of the invoice being sent between two parties. So it's definitely on top of Lightning is one way to visualize it.
Makes sense. Okay, so now that we have a good understanding of how LNURL came to be,
yeah,
talk to me about Lightning addresses and how they tie into LNURL and what they enable.
Definitely. So okay, a lot to unpack here. So I just want to give a little pretext. So the user experience right now for a user using a Bolt 11, which is the normal Lightning invoice, right? You make a Lightning invoice, it's the Bolt 11 invoice. There's two parts of it that are essential to the network, but create for pretty limited user experience. The first one is that they're single use, right? So you're supposed to use an invoice and not use it again. Technically, there have been some advancements to disallow that piece, but let's just assume that for now, as it stands right now, you pay a Lightning invoice, it is done, it's single use. Second, it's the expiration time. Again, it's on purpose, it's needed for the network because otherwise you have funds locked up in routes, but invoices and HLCs need to expire, right? They need to expire at a certain time. This creates for great user experience if you're making a single payment experience. So let's say I add a bunch of stuff to my e-commerce cart, I click a button, and then it shows me a QR code, I pay it, that's the end, right? And that's fine. That experience is not optimal for users that are making multiple payments in the same time, or multiple people are making the same payment at the same time. So an example, if I'm a famous streamer or online person and I want to receive tips, donations, or whatever, I cannot put a Lightning invoice on my stream, because what the experience will be is out of 10,000 people, 9,999 that attempt to pay that will fail and one person will succeed, right? That's a horrible experience. So what came out of that was LNURL Pay, which again is just meant to be a payment interaction, but it gives you more capabilities. So it gives you things like you can set minimum and maximum amounts. So you don't have to say, I want 555 Satoshis. You can say, I want between 10,000 and 100,000. You can send me anything, right? This QR code will allow you to send me anything. You can actually send messages across with it, so comments or messages that get received on the other end. And there's additional metadata here and there. But basically what that LNURL Pay QR code enables is a static QR code, a QR code that can be reused and reused and reused for different payment amounts from different people at any point. So you can put that on the stream and that will be fine, right? And the 10,000 people can actually make the payments. Now, that is great. QR codes are great. They're ephemeral. They're the same. Every wallet can handle QR codes. It's easy to understand. You know that you have to point the camera to it and do it. But we go back to the point where we're trying to onboard 3 billion people, 3 billion gamers into this world. And specifically when it comes to Bitcoin and Lightning, we're not even talking about gamers only, we're talking about the entire world. We want to onboard the entire world into Bitcoin and Lightning. usually users need a 10 to 100x improvement on the user experience or the features or the capabilities of such technology in order to change behavior, right? So right now, if I go to Starbucks and I take my Apple Watch, I will order and I will simply tap my Apple Watch and I have paid for my coffee, right? Even though there are advancements in NFC for Lightning, you simply cannot compete with that experience of tapping your watch, because what's the experience right now? Let's say the person shows me a QR code. I pick up my phone, I unlock it, I open the wallet, I wait for it to load, I swipe to the camera, I scan it, I confirm, I wait 2-3 seconds for the payment to clear, voila, I paid for it, right? The experience is not yet better in a real world environment. So how can we improve it further? Let's maintain the capabilities of the LNURL Pay, which is multiple payments, static QR code, ability to send multiple amounts, send messages, and etc. But let's make that easier. So instead of you having to know or print or give someone your QR code, let's map that QR code into something that's readable, that's user understood, right? And the easiest way to do that is, again, LNURL is already on the HTTP layer. It's already on the web RESTful API layers, right? So what we did is we created the Lightning address, which is effectively a map between a LNURL Pay to an internet identifier. So an internet identifier is the most famous one that you've seen, is an email address, which is, kevin@kevin.com, right? It's user@domain. And you can have complaints about the fact that DNS is a centralized solution. You can have complaints about how the web and internet service providers are centralized solutions. That, I agree with those statements and arguments. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't attempt, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't build better experiences. DNS is used all over the world. If there was a better alternative, I'm more than willing to support it and interact with it, but there really isn't yet. There's Tor and Onion routing. There's some additional capabilities on some other standards, but as it stands, what it does is you can have Kevin@Kevin.com be your payment identifier, right? So you have a Lightning address, which is Kevin@Kevin.com. You own the Kevin domain. You have the Kevin user, and so André, now I need to pay you. Right? So we go back to that question. Let's say I'm a service provider, or I'm a gamer, or I'm a user, or I'm another person. I'm trying to pay Kevin. How do I pay Kevin? I need to either, find you on a platform and then ask for an invoice from you, or I need to find a static QR code that you have somewhere, or I need to ask you for a Bitcoin address, right? Like, it's always interaction, right, between the two parties. I don't have, and with emails, I don't need to ask you anything. I can just find your email and I just send you a message. If you choose to ignore it, that's your choice. So Lightning addresses solve that discoverability piece. I no longer need to ask you for something. I get to say, hey, I'm going to send a payment to Kevin@Kevin.com. Right? So that's what Lightning address does on the discoverability piece. But specifically, now I want to just touch on the ZEBEDEE side. Why is it interesting for us? We consume open networks. ZEBEDEE uses the open network of Bitcoin, the permissionless network of Lightning, right? We use those networks. It would be a shame for us to use the networks and build upon it, but then create entirely centralized solutions on top of it, right? So an example, every ZEBEDEE user has a ZEBEDEE gamer tag. So ZEBEDEE gamers can send from one gamer tag to the other just fine, just as you can with a Venmo user to another Venmo user. But between a Venmo user to a Cash App user, you can't send funds, right? You simply can't do that. Both of them speak dollars. Both of them speak the US dollar, but you can't send funds to each other. So what happens is you don't have interoperability between service providers. So they speak the same language, but they don't talk to each other. With Lightning address, again, Lightning address and LNURL are simply HTTP standards. Anyone can adopt them, right? So Lightning address brings interoperability between service providers. So whereas right now, for an example, CoinCorner is a UK-based exchange, right? They have Lightning addresses enabled. For someone at the ZEBEDEE platform to send a payment to someone at CoinCorner, you would, again, hey, Joe, can you please give me an invoice so that I can pay you, right? That would be the user flow. Now I don't need to do that. Now I can go into the ZEBEDEE wallet, I can click a few buttons, and I can type joe@coincorner.io, and I can make the payment. That was impossible before Lightning address because the two service providers were not interoperable. We build systems differently. We have different solutions, right? The only interoperable piece was the Lightning Network side. Now on the HTTP layer with Lightning Address, we're interoperable. So Lightning Address solves discoverability issues, and it solves interoperability issues for providers. Any provider that supports Lightning Address can now send to any provider that supports Lightning Address. So imagine a scenario where you had Kevin at Venmo.com and Kevin at CashApp.com. Now you can send between the two of them, right? That's a very, very powerful thing. And we're just seeing this being adopted by just about every platform, every piece of software in the industry. After the release in August of 2021, I believe it was by October, 80% of all the wallets had some support for receiving or for sending, or were engaging in that capability. Now I would say it's more like 95%. There's a handful of wallets that don't yet support some of it, but I imagine they will in the future. So that's what Lightning Address is. It's building very simple, familiar user interface that the next 4, 5, 6 billion users can see and say, someone who's used to sending emails can now interact with Bitcoin. Do you know what I mean? That's like how simple it is. Now, if they want to go down the rabbit hole, great. That was just their introduction to it. Now they can go down the rabbit hole and perform the learnings and learn about this and learn about cold storage, learn about Lightning channels and so forth. But we need to bring them in, and the first experience for them can't be a 24-word seed phrase, because they will close the app and go away. Something that looks like an email is very, very friendly for them. That was a very long way of answering the question, I think.